Hello from San Francisco. My name is Gerard de Graaf. I'm the head of the European Union office in San Francisco and also the senior envoy for digital to the United States. And it's a pleasure to talk about Brussels and to talk about Silicon Valley and about San Francisco. Je suis Bruxellois, ik ben een Brusselaar. Om het op zijn Brussels to say it in Dutch or Flemish and in French. I lived for a long time in Brussels whilst I was working at the European Commission headquarters, and so I've really kind of come to love the city, and I must admit I miss it when I'm now living here for like a year and a half in San Francisco, but of course go back regularly to talk with my colleagues and also with family that still lives in Belgium. Maybe the first question to answer is, well, why are you here? Why is the European Union in San Francisco? We are in Washington, D.C. We have an embassy, we have a delegation in Washington, D.C. So definitely we were in the U.S. I've actually worked at the Washington delegation some time ago. We're here because there's very important developments happening here. There's a lot of technology, of course, that is emerging. I mean, just look what's happened over the last year and a half in the area of artificial intelligence. I mean, semiconductors, I mean, quantum, of course, the social media platforms and marketplaces that we're all using. So this is a hotbed of innovation, a hotbed of technology. It's also a very big state. California is the biggest state in the United States. If it were a country, it would be the fifth economy in the world. So it's important that the European Union is here, also because the European Union, and maybe that's not always recognized in this part of the US, is a technology superpower. We are also very innovative. We have a lot of technology breakthroughs. We have deep tech. We have excellent research and innovation in the European Union. And in addition, we are also regulating from time to time. We believe that technology should serve people, that we have to make sure that our fundamental rights and values are protected and actually secured and enhanced as technology permeates more and more our societies and economies. And over the last couple of years, the European Union has put some rules in place to govern the behavior and the practices of particularly big tech platforms. You are probably familiar with the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which, by the way, California has implemented for the state of California. And in addition, another 13 states in the US have then copied California. So we have a version of the GDPR already in this part of the country. But more recently, for example, the European Union has adopted legislation to make the internet safer and to protect our fundamental rights and values. It's called the Digital Services Act. We also adopted and implemented a regulation that should make the internet marketplace more competitive, more contestable. It's dominated by a limited number of companies that have become so powerful. It's very difficult to compete with them, and that's the Digital Markets Act. And then, only a few weeks ago, there was a political agreement on the European AI Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, to make sure that the AI that is used in our societies is trustworthy. If you ask people around the world, well, do you really trust AI? A lot of people, about 50%, say, no, not really. And so to put some rules and obligations in place to ensure that AI is protecting, not discriminating against one group as opposed to another group, is really important and fundamental. And so the European Union is leading in tech regulation. And obviously, with major companies here in the US, on the West Coast, in Silicon Valley, a lot of these companies are very active in the European Union, also successful in the European Union, but they will have to comply with European Union rules when they operate in the European Union. Now, so why are we here? Because we want to build bridges with the West Coast of the United States. The orientation here on the West Coast is Asia Pacific. I mean, we are 10,000 kilometers away from Brussels, 9 hours of time difference, so people here are not necessarily thinking all the time what's happening in Europe, so they develop caricatures and stereotypes. Europe can't compete on the technology. Europe regulates, they see something that moves, and so it regulates, it stifles innovation. So we're here to tell them, no, that's not really the reality. We are very strong on technology development. also in the Brussels region, in Belgium more generally, but across Europe. And yes, we do regulate, but we regulate in a way that should not stifle innovation, that should build trust. And the market, like for AI, if half of the people kind of don't trust AI, is not going to grow to its full potential. People will say, look, I'm not sure I want to use this. They are going to shy away from this. So rules can actually build trust, and trust is the foundation of an effective and competitive market. So what do we do? How does a day at the European office look like? Well, of course, we organize events. We want to bring Brussels to the Bay. So we have a series of events which is literally called Brussels to the Bay, bringing policymakers from Brussels, policymakers here locally, also legislators from Sacramento, from the California legislature together, people from industry, from academia, from universities like Stanford and Berkeley, from civil society, and we exchange views. We try to learn from each other. It's a two-way traffic. We learn from what is happening in California, where the technology is going, and they learn from us, like, well, how are you dealing with these issues? What about regulation? How do you make sure that these technologies work for the benefit of people, and that it's people benefiting from technology and not technology and profits before people? So that's like a typical day. We interact with the California legislature, for example. It's the biggest state in the union. There's a California effect in the US, so if California adopts legislation, a lot of other states will immediately imitate, copy California legislation. And California is telling us, we want to work with you. We are inspired by you. We are also believing in the same values. We share this. We want also to combat climate change, to promote environmental sustainability. We want to make the internet safer. We want to protect our miners. We want to ensure that kind of smaller firms, innovative firms, have a shot at getting to the market and not going to be strangled by these really very, very big tech firms that kind of have a lot of power and can kind of keep the markets relatively closed. So working with California legislature is something that we do very regularly, even to the point where, I mean, they ask us for advice. And I mean, I testified, for example, 2 weeks ago before the California legislature about the European Union AI Act. What's in it? Why are we regulating? How are we regulating? Very productive. And so that's a very important interlocutor for the European Union office. And then more generally, we talk, of course, with the industry. Many of the industries are now regulated by European Union rules, and so they will have to comply. So we were, of course, observing how they're doing. They tell us about things that are working well, things that are kind of a bit more challenging. We work with the academic community. Stanford and Berkeley, some of the top universities in the world. There's a lot of expertise, and they're also very positive about Europe, and they want to kind of be helpful in explaining Europe here to the West Coast, and also kind of getting kind of support for like the European approach, the European values here, and then with think tanks and civil society. So these are busy days. It's a fascinating time to be in Silicon Valley. The European, I think, approach is now increasingly recognized. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., not so much is happening. There's not a lot of rulemaking. The Congress is very polarized, and therefore what's happening in the biggest state in the United States is becoming even more important, including for the European Union. So it's an exciting time to be here. We've been here now a year and a half. I think we are a voice in the debate. And I think also from the perspective of Brussels, I think Brussels is well known here. Of course, the Brussels effect, and Brussels is often associated with rulemaking. I think it's important to show that we're more than rulemaking, that there's a lot of technology and innovation in the area of sustainable development, in the area of digital, in the area of health, in the area of agriculture, mobility, smart energy systems. So come out here, show what we can do, show all the kind of the very innovative solutions that are being developed in the Brussels region and beyond, and also kind of be part of the conversation, because we are at the moment, the technologies that are being developed here are going to shape the world for the next 50, 100 years. This is really disruptive, and to be part of that conversation, to come here, and also to, of course, make sure that we invite people to come from here to Europe. That type of conversation between the EU and the US is absolutely critical to make sure that the technology works for us, that we maximize the benefits, we minimize the risk, and we actually achieve a better quality of life, a higher standard of living for ourselves and for the next generation. Thank you very much, and you're always welcome to come to San Francisco, and you'll be welcomed with open arms by the European Union office here in San Francisco.